Good evening. This is Pastor Bob at Sunrise Community Church. How you guys doing? Hope you're having a wonderful day. It's pouring rain here. We've had rain all day long, on and off, and they say we're in a terrible drought, so this is a good thing. And talking about water, we'll be back talking about Jonah this coming week. Following up on what we talked about last week, we started off with the 5th through the 10th verse of Jonah, and we really only got to the 6th verse. So this week, before we get in to verses 11 through 17, is where I'd like to be. But we're going to go and we're going to talk a little bit more just about what's going on there in verses 7, 8, and 9, because once they cast the lots, once they realize that Jonah is the culprit, they start to pepper him with questions. Now, the amazing thing is, Jonah has been quiet up to this point. The captain goes down in the hold of the ship, but Jonah stays silent. He asked him to pray to his God. Jonah stays silent. It's only now, when all the sailors, the whole ship confronts him, that Jonah finally starts to speak. And they're peppering him with questions. Who are you? What kind of line of work, or what line of work are you in? What nationality are you? Where are you from? And they're asking him these questions. They're trying to get at his identity and find out, because they know if they can get to his identity, they can figure out which God that they've offended, what's caused this terrible storm. And they're asking him these questions because they want to know, they want to understand. They're not asking questions like we would ask questions today, but they have a motive, because in ancient times, every race, every nationality, every profession, every trade had their own god or gods. And you might say, hey, Bob, that's okay. That's really not true today. That's not relevant today for us today. I mean, we don't believe that there's a God for every place and every nationality. I mean, a lot of people don't even believe there's a God at all. And I'd say, you're right. Nobody would argue the fact that we don't believe in all these gods. But at the same time, nobody would argue the fact that financial profit can become people's gods. People can sacrifice their lives, sacrifice their morals for financial profit. So even though the god Mercury doesn't exist, we would agree with that. We don't have to burn offerings to him, but he's still an influence in people's life. God Zeus, the goddess of beauty, she doesn't exist. We would agree with that, but yet men and women are so concerned today about their bodily image and what they look like. So to some degrees, these things do exist. And as they're asking Jonah these questions, it's amazing to me when he starts to answer the question, the very last thing they ask about is his nationality. Yet when Jonah starts to answer the questions, the first thing he says is, I am a Hebrew. That's the first thing. It sort of lets us believe that Jonah's identity, the foundation level, the very fundamental thing about Jonah's identity was his nationality and then his faith in God. So it was like that is the basis of who he is. Now you're starting to understand why he would have so much trouble taking this gospel, the gospel of God's goodness, God's love, to another nation, because he wants to be true to his nation. This is all caused because Jonah is tacking his religion on to who he is ethnically. I think people still do that today. People still do that today. Today it might be a little different, and it's not maybe just because of poor teaching. Maybe it's because the love of God through Jesus Christ hasn't really gone deep enough into our hearts. Maybe it hasn't got to that foundational level. Many people say, we believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins, that he gave his life for us to forgive our sins, but they find their security, they find their self-worth, not in the fact that Christ loved them and gave himself for them, but many of these people find themselves in their security in their careers, in their financial success, in their savings account, their 401ks. These are where people seem to find their securities. And I think that causes a big problem, because it causes a very shallow identity with God. Now you say, well, how is that possible? And how does that happen? Well, the Bible tells us how it happens. If you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, it talks about we are made in the image of God. We're made in the image of God. Now think about this with me for a minute. You can't have an image of something unless you have an original to get the reflection from. So we're made in the image of God. So the human race was never meant to stand alone. So we were always meant to get our image, to get our worth from the one true God. So the real truth here is that he's trying to tell us is if we don't find our image in God, then we will have to create something else that's a God for us in our lives and get our image from that. This explains how professing Christians can be so greedy, so materialistic. They can be so caught up in the world's schemes and themes of things, and they can fall into all the anxiety, all the overwork, all the stress that this life has to offer. That's just the beginning point. We want to get through that so that we can get to the real story that's going on here in 11 through 17. I mean, in verse 11, they say, what can we do? We have clearly found out that it's you that has caused all these problems. What can we do to calm the sea? And you know what they say? What Jonah says, throw me in to the sea and it will become calm for you. Now a lot of people say, oh look, he has turned around. He is now repentant toward God instead of rebellious toward him. That's what a lot of people would say. I got a better question for you. Is that what he's saying? Or is he saying, wait a minute, I'd rather die than take the gospel to Nineveh. I'd rather die. Throw me in the sea. I'd rather die. Or is the answer somewhere in between? We'll talk about all this on Sunday. God bless you. I hope you have a great weekend. Don't forget, send your prayer request in on Facebook comments and we will pray for them. Also, don't forget we're having the women's Bible study, or the women's book club, book club that starts on the first Tuesday after Mother's Day. I think it's the 11th. And we're giving away the book Fervent. If you want to read that book, if you want to be part of that, or just have the book to read, if you send us your information, we'll send you a copy of the book. God bless you. Have a great day.